Hello, my name is John. I'm here sat in London in a beautiful backdrop, and I'm here to talk about matters pertaining to great importance. Now, people think that Tower Bridge is London Bridge. It isn't. About a quarter of a mile down the Thames, or upriver as they call it, is London Bridge, and that is where the traitors, where Traitors Gate is, and that is where the heads of anyone that was opposed to the British Constitution, they had their heads sliced off. They had their heads, we're just saying goodbye to some lovely girls there. Their heads were cut off and they were stuck on spikes on the old London Bridge, which is like the old iconic sort of medieval bridge. And the heads were stuck on spikes, and that is why that thing there is a spike. And it's really weird on a sort of an energetic level. When you cross over to that part of London, it's got the highest crime rate of London and probably parts of the UK. Got a very, very low vibe to it, and it's there for a reason. It's historically is an area of low vibration, and again, that is a spike, and that really, in my opinion, is a symbol of anyone who goes against the establishment is going to have their head shoved on it, cut off and shoved on it. So that's why it dominates the skyline of London. But to be honest, I care not for it, and I will speak out to anyone who wants to stand up against injustice. That is no threat to us. Is that all they can offer? Then they've got nothing to offer, and we'll keep fighting. And God bless all victims and survivors. Let's stand up, and like I say, the fear. People say to me, John, are you not frightened? And I want to talk about fear, and I say this on many, many occasions. I took an oath in my policing career that I would act without fear or without favour, right? Now, there is no favour I've got on anyone who abuses a child, and my fear against anyone who abuses a child and comes after me, there is no fear, because my fear is a drop in the ocean, a drop in that River Thames, compared to the fear of a young child who's about to be abused. And I say to anyone who's in any dilemma, should they stand up? Yes, you should stand up. Stand up, because our silence is their strength, their weapon, right? And when we speak out, we put the cat amongst the pigeon. We are not frightened of these people. We have the truth. We stand by the truth, and we stick with the truth, and we will expose this evil, vile rot that is undermining, eroding and decimating our society and attacking that is most precious, and our children. So we must stand up and say no more and be frightened of none of them. God bless. Right, hello, my name is John Wedger. People may know me from social media, but for those who don't, I served 27 and a half years in the Metropolitan Police as a detective. I gained what might be classed as notoriety for my stance as a whistleblowing detective in exposing the deliberate cover-up of child prostitution within the London area. For my efforts, I was attacked, bullied and hounded. My job went, I nearly lost my home, and there was an attempt to remove my children, all because I exposed the heinous crime of organised child prostitution, in which the victims ranged from the years of 9 to 14 and were all vulnerable kids that came out the care system. I now dedicate my time in a twofold manner, in which I expose and try and assist the whistleblowers and the highlight what whistleblowers go through in order to sort of spout out the truth. And the other strand is I work closely with victims and survivors of abuse and getting their testimonies and their voices heard. So today I'm here in London. I've just attended the ICSA, which is the IICSA, which is the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse, held in central London. I was at a prelim hearing in which my testimony is being used for what's classed as core participant status, and they want to know about my experiences in what I exposed in the police, and hopefully it may go forward to change things. I don't hold my breath, but we'll wait and see. And in doing so, I have then linked in with various victims and survivors of abuse, all of which have very unique and individual stories to tell, all of which are horrific, and all of which sort of go to highlight not only their endeavours in coming forward and standing up, but also the abuse that they encountered as young and vulnerable children. Everyone I speak to now are adults, however, emotionally there's still a child within. And at the inquiry today I met an old friend of mine, I can't name his name, but his testimony is quite horrific and involved someone high up and in prominence of society. The other thing which was quite surprising was that my strand of the inquiry involves organisations, and I was speaking to a group of gentlemen that have come from all over the UK and Southern Ireland, and they were brought over at the relevant time, usually during the 70s and 80s, to attend a seminary in the UK. Again, I'm going to be very selective and respectful of their accounts, because this is all prejudice and their testimonies haven't been heard yet, and I do not want in any way to pervert the course of justice. But these were lads that were brought over, but these lads wished to attend a seminary, which is a priest college really, and these are all aspiring young priests. Anyway, what happened were, these are lads that were aged from 11 upwards, that when they attended this college was subjected to really what was classed as organised rape. Their silence was attained because they came from very staunch Catholic backgrounds, and some of them come from staunch parts of the UK, such as Scotland, where in Glasgow there is still sectarianism, and Southern Ireland, okay, it's outside of the UK jurisdiction, however Southern Ireland is a very staunch and almost predominantly Catholic country, in which really the Catholic Church have total sort of control over the whole thing. And any sort of speech against the Catholic Church is seen as slander and is stamped on straight away. These are men that are now in their 50s, and some of them are a bit older, and they're recounting the horrors that they endured as young men. And really this was sanctioned by the Catholic Church. Now, what came out of it was the fact that the inquiry has approached the Vatican for an account and some justification what went on, and also they want some sort of cooperation. And however, the Vatican, because, and it's really strange, because there is this sort of conspiracy theory that when it goes with regards to the Vatican, the City of London and Washington, these are independent states. However, that was highlighted today, and the Vatican relied on its own sort of state sovereignty to withhold information. However, they have adduced some information, but they are withholding quite a lot. So this goes to bolster this so-called conspiracy theory that this is an independent state. Now, I can sort of add weight to that, in as much as part of my claim against the police does actually stretch as far as the City of London police. And when I sat in Parliament with the former Police and Crime Minister, Sir Michael Penning, we were discussing the City of London and what he can do to bring them in line. And he turned around and he said to me, "Those dogs are a law to themselves." And I pressed him on this, and I said, "Mike, I know about the history of the City of London, and you actually have no jurisdiction over them." He said, "No, none whatsoever." Now, when you look at the City of London and you look at their police service, all Commonwealth police services, and this includes Canada, Jamaica, Australia, New Zealand, the Pitcairn Islands, the Falkland Islands, Tristan da Cunha, all over the place, they all have what's called the King Edward's coronet. And this is the crown which you see on warrant cards. This is the crown which you see on the British Army insignia, the Royal Navy, the Royal Air Force, the Marines, etc. And that's the loyalty to the crown, the sovereignty of the UK. However, the City of London doesn't have that. It has 2 golden griffins, and there is nothing to do with the crown whatsoever. So when we hear the alternative media that do spout on, and it does go down the bracket of being conspiracy theory, but these are independent sovereign states, I've had corroboration from the Police and Crime Minister that in respect to the City of London that exists, and I've just had it in the independent investigation into child sexual abuse that the Vatican is part of the same ilk. Now, I've yet to sort of have anything to do with Washington. I've never had anything to do with Washington, and no doubt it will crop up at some point. So out of the three of them, two of them I can say are independent sovereign states. Now, what we all discussed is actually how much society suffers as a result of child abuse. And if we look at our prison systems, 80% of those that are incarcerated in our penal system, our prisons, have come from abused childhood backgrounds. In addition to that, we have an illiteracy rate of 80%. In respect to drug addiction, 90% of those on Class A opiates, heroin, come from abused background, and majority of that is sexually abused. So we're seeing that child abuse is a core of so much. Yet, in respect to policing terms, those that investigate it are afforded very limited resources, and those of them, like myself, and there are a few of us, I'm not like independent on this, there's been quite a few that have come forward, that when we actually do stick our heads above the parapet and we do start to speak out about really what is going on, we are crushed, because they do not want what's going on, being exposed to the general public. And when we see how much that we suffer as a society, and we realise that this is a core of so much social ills, it is a bit of a no-brainer that this crops out. Now, I was discussing, and with yourself, Sandra, because it's Sandra who's interviewing me here, about society, what's going on in society at the moment. And this isn't like a quick fix. This is a long-term agenda which is now playing out. And we are seeing, especially in the UK, when we look, I was brought up in the 1970s, and those of us that have come from my sort of age bracket, we look back at our youth now and we see a totally unrecognisable society. We see young kids that have no interest in their future. We see young kids that have got no interest in society, that have got disrespect for the elders, disrespect and disregard for authority. Now, I'm all for challenging authority, but I also think that we need to live within boundaries. And we see these boundaries have been eroded. Now, I want to say something here now, and this is quite controversial, and this has upset a lot of people in the past. I was left in a very unfortunate position as a young man in my 20s, where I ended up bringing up children on my own. I'm not just talking about one children, I'm talking about 4 children. Now, I became a single parent throughout my 20s, 30s and my 40s, and it was an incredibly hard uphill struggle. And my kids suffered as a result of that. And being in the police service for many years, and initially starting off as a uniform copper in a very, very impoverished and rough part of London and also the UK, I saw dysfunctionality in its rawest form, and I see, social deprivation and what happens, and majority of them did come from damaged and broken backgrounds. So when we do this to our children, when our marriages break down, and unfortunately they do break down, and sometimes there's nothing anyone can do, and I'm not denigrating or attacking anyone that flees from an abusive environment relationship, because that's what happens, or whether there is trauma in the family and death occurs when people like myself unfortunately end up looking after children. But when it is a choice, and the choice is based on lifestyle, and we put our lifestyle ahead of that of the concerns of our children, then our society suffers, right? Now, a man is needed in a family environment because he can pass on his skills. A girl needs a man so she can respect a man. A boy needs a mum so she can respect a mum. Now, the attack in the UK, in my opinion, started post-war, went through to the 60s and increased in the 70s, and by the time 80s, it was at crescendo level. And it was a deliberate attempt to bring a wedge between family values and break up the family. What we're seeing now is an influx of people coming from the former European Union, which was blocked many years ago, up until the 2000s, of having access. So I'm talking about the Baltic states. And the one thing that's happened when these Europeans came, they brought back really heartwarming and decent old school values, and they did. And we are seeing families that are still united. We are still seeing total functionality, and it's lovely and it's great to see it. And there is this thing with Brexit and a xenophobia that gets brought, and they were attacking, saying it's a beast from the east and criminals are coming. But I've seen nothing but positivity that has come out of it, because it's decency that we have lost. And it's not the British people's fault. It's something that the government deliberately engineered to destroy a once proud, strong, decent, fit and honourable race. And they've gone out their way to attack us. Now, for bullying to occur, it needs you to acquiesce to bullying. And unfortunately, that might sound a little bit harsh to victims of bullying. But all we need to do is to stand up and say that they're not going to do it.
The inquiry today was part one. What is going to be the next one, John?
I've got another prelim hearing in January, and the trial date is set for mid-April 2020. And there has been quite a concerted attempt to have me removed from what's classed as core participant status, which actually is a witness to this inquiry. Now, my barrister, who's a lovely guy, has turned around and said, out of all the police witnesses he's had, he's never seen such opposition as to me giving evidence. Yet he's persevered, and I'm there. It is cemented in. And my account is going to highlight the deliberate attempts of the Metropolitan Police in the cover-up of young children from vulnerable backgrounds being used as prostitutes. And we are talking, like I mentioned a bit earlier, from the ages of 9 to 14. Now the question needs to be asked, why? Why is this occurring, and how has it been allowed to happen? Now, when I took on the role, initially there was one girl that came forward at the age of 14 to allege that she'd been pimped out, and I was told in my briefing her that she was a liar. I met the girl, she was not a liar. This was a brave little girl, her name was Zoe, and the reason I name her is because she is deceased. And I do this in honour of her and all the other children that we have lost to this vile criminality. Now, Zoe died in mysterious circumstances, only a couple of years later, in the full flow of the investigation into what went on. And when I looked into this at the beginning of 2000, about 2005, this underbelly of vile criminality had been gone undetected and allowed to flourish for a good 15 years. The police knew about it, right? And as inquiry went on, not just myself, but my lovely little team, it was a very small team, we exposed how organised, well run and well established this was. These children are a commodity. And it's like a criminal profiler said to me, you can use drugs once, you can use a child many times, right? What I've uncovered, exposed and learned is that children are the number one commodity when it comes to financial reward. They far outweigh that of drugs, firearms and everything else. It is a massive, well organised, well-oiled and well-functioning machine that the British government and the British police are reluctant to do anything about. The Catholic Church institution. Yeah, like earlier on we met with 2 members. Yeah, there's 12 of them that have come forward. They've come from good backgrounds. Their families were honoured that they, at the age of 11 years old, had elected to become priests. Their families were proud of them, and their families shipped them out, wishing them all the best, you know, and thinking that they will go on to have a lovely, spiritually rewarding and decent career. These kids, and they were kids. Now, I need to mention something. One of the men today that we met with, and I know that you spoke in depth with him, he's in his 60s, and he spoke about his grandson. And he turned around and he said, my grandson's 10 years old. And what I did was I did this with my hand to sort of indicate a height level. I said, a 10-year-old's like this. He went, yeah. I said, it shocked you, didn't it? He said, it did. I said, because that was the age you were when you went out there. And I brought up children, and my oldest is nearly 30, and I still see him as a little boy. I still see him as a child, you know, an innocent little child. So when these kids went out there, they were anally raped, right? And it was so organised and so well covered up that those that did it to them, and these were tutors, these were all priests that were put in a place to tutor these young boys that were taken from good Catholic families, were sent, some of them overseas. They were scared, they were frightened, they were vulnerable, but they were aspirational, and they were met with rape and buggery. And it had gone on with total impunity prior to them arriving and decades after them leaving. And I said to them, did any of you, and 2 of them were best friends, they knew each other from school, sorry, and then they met up at the seminary. I said, did you not ever confirm? They said, but we didn't. We were too frightened to. We were just shocked, you know, and embarrassed and full of shame. And we started then talking about the grooming procedure, what led to a man taking an innocent, little decent kid, and then, you know, because this wasn't done with violence, this was done by grooming, by coercion. And one of them said, one of the priests, he worked in what was classed as infirmary, which was like, I would say, like their version of a hospital. And he said that they had to weigh them. The children needed to be weighed. And so in order to be weighed accurately, you had to be naked. Now, you're talking about young, hormonal, pubescent boys, you know. And so anything would arouse a young boy at that age. And, you know, being a young lad, a man, you know, myself, you know what it's like. It's horrific, the male hormones. And then they would use that moment to then go on to masturbate the boy and everything else. And then the shame comes in, and then they've got them in their conspiracy. Another one, it was saying that one of the tutors was in charge of hygiene and would teach the boys how to clean themselves. And part of that involved pulling back the foreskin and cleaning the penis. I mean, they had this on lockdown. You know, they had this fine-tuned, and it had gone on so much. And then we started speaking about, did you approach the church? And they said, yeah. I said, how did it go? Horrific. Now, I know this because I approached the church, and I approached Cardinal, and I'm going to mention his name, Cardinal Vincent Nichols, and I asked him what he was going to do about the sexual abuse of children, because I am a Catholic. I was brought up a Catholic. Now, I don't frequent Catholic churches anymore because I don't out of disgust, right? Now, there's a lot of people who find a lot of solace in the Catholic Church, and I'm with them on that, because part of our existence is a spiritual existence, and it's a mind, body and a soul, and the soul, aka, is a spirit. And I believe in Jesus, and I believe in Jesus fights the devil. So shame on anyone who hides behind the name of Jesus to abuse children, because that is worse than Satanism itself, in my opinion. At least the Satanists have got some honesty that they worship a deity that abuses kids, and to hide behind Jesus, I mean, well, they're worse, you know. And we did have some communication, myself and Vincent Nichols, via mail, and then I requested a one-to-one meeting, and he delegated it down to his bishop, Paul McAleen. And I met with Paul McAleen, and do you know what, Paul McAleen? Shame on you, my friend. Shame on you. You don't deserve that role as bishop. You don't deserve to be a spiritual manager of decent, good people, because you are failing them. Because do you know what? He didn't care, and he didn't care. And I walked out of that meeting. The first time I've ever walked out on anything, and I walked out of that meeting because he didn't care. And if he is representative of the Catholic Church, they deserve to fall. They do. They deserve to crumble and fall because of what they've done. Now, I'm not a victim of sexual abuse of the Catholic Church, but I have highlighted it to them, and they do not give a toss for you. They don't. There was not 1 ounce of compassion. And when I discussed my account with the victims of sexual abuse of the Catholic Church, they were met with the same arrogance and same reluctance and the same cognitive distortion and dissonance, right, that a paedophile displays, in all honesty. Now, I've met some beautiful Catholic priests, and I had one that was a good guy that helped me through a lot of hard times, right, but unfortunately it is awash with nonsense, and there is a reluctance of them to accept reality. Now, we got to look at this. What makes the management hierarchy, right, what's the word of it? The papal nunca or something, there is a word of it, and it's a legal team that represents the Vatican, have this cognitive dissonance towards the victims. And do you know what it is? It's liability. Now, what I found that when I've been in various meetings in Parliament and council offices, the one consistent strand that flows through this is that there were paedophiles employed that acted with impunity, were not challenged by their peers, by their colleagues. How many of the residential homes had infirmaries, had a matron, and these are young children, young 4-year-old kids and upwards, that were buggered by old men. They would have suffered and did suffer horrific injuries and sexual infections. They would have been treated. So where are the matrons, the doctors that treated these? Where is that? Where are they? Where is their voice? They hide behind their silence, and shame on them. It goes further. The principals of these places knew about it, because why would they go to such extreme lengths to cover it up? We take this one step further. The local authorities that appointed these people and were funded for these homes and were made millions out of these homes, where is their voice? Where's their legal team? We take this further. Do you know what silences them? Insurance companies. Insurance companies. I'm going to call out one company whose name is consistently coming up, Zurich Insurance. So, and I was in Zurich giving an interview, and I was asked by the team, what do you know about paedophilia in Switzerland? I said, I'll tell you what I know. I know about Zurich Insurance, that has deliberately covered up and protected the paedophilic activities of these institutions. So we got to follow the money, and it all comes down to money. And do you know what? Shame on them. And shareholders of these companies, question them. Ask to speak to their legal teams as to why this abhorrent crime is going on. You know? And it always follow the money.
Okay, so John, you were talking about the first inquiry. The second inquiry is going to take place on Tuesday with the two main witnesses. There's 12 in total, and as I understand, this is going to be the first one in history in England. The other inquiry took place in Ireland against the church, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, this is a monumental step forward, because we've got to look at Ireland. predominantly, well, it is. It's a massive Catholic country, and not just Ireland, France. We've seen it happen in France. The French have just taken on the Vatican for the abuse that has occurred within the Catholic institutions within France, and they've actually made massive step forwards in gaining some form of justice. And there's a film coming out, I think it's called By the Grace of God, and it's going on about the abuse that occurred in France. And another one is coming out in Poland. I don't mean a film, but I mean an inquiry in Poland. So when we look at Europe, 90% of Western Europe is predominantly 90% Catholic, and the abuse has gone on sort of unabated, like I keep saying. So to see the Irish that's so complicit in the Catholic faith, and this is in no way, please do not get me wrong, I am never going to attack someone's faith, because faith is what's so important to us, you know, but to see the abuse that's gone on and see people standing out, you've got to understand the strength of character and the bravery of them doing it. Now in Britain, we are a Protestant nation by decree of Henry VIII, and therefore we've moved away from Catholic control. So it's a lot easier for us to stand up, and we have a freedom of choice between religions, whereas in Ireland they didn't. You know, so wherever you turn for some solace and some respite and some comfort, you're not going to get it, because it's going to be autonomously Catholic. So to see Ireland coming forward and being open and receptive to this abuse is absolutely fantastic. And let's go forward, because one of the big Watergates in this was a film that came out in the 90s, which was the Magdalene Sisters. And power to Film 4 for bringing it out, and that exposed the wash houses, the workhouses run by the Catholic missionaries and the convents when they took on the so-called women of ill repute, and it was just abuse, and it was organised corruption, it was organised criminality, and it was organised prostitution, and many women died and many children died because there were children born to both the women and to the nuns that ended up, whether they were killed in birth, aborted or whatever. But we've seen mass graves that have occurred, and I think there was one in Ireland where there was numerous skeletons of infants that were recovered, and also there was one in Scotland. So to see the Irish culture like pushing forward with this is brilliant. Right. So when we look at what these men are doing, is groundbreaking, and they're going ahead on a live stream, and it's the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, but the strand is organisations.
First in English history.
Yes, it is, and it's to do with the Catholic Church and what the Catholic Church have orchestrated, been complicit in and covered up, and it's monumental.
Is this, I was debating with you, is this going to get the head of the snake?
That's a big question. A lot of people have been attacking this inquiry, this ICSA inquiry, saying many people have approached me, social media, the general public, saying what good is it, and they deem it as some sort of deep state, military intelligence governed cover up, right? And what they class as gatekeeping. Now, okay, that may be at the core of it. I'm not disputing that, but you know what? Having been an activist in this game for not short of a decade now, do you know what? I'm getting pretty much fed up of conspiracy theorists, and I'm getting fed up with the alternative media, and I'm getting quite upset about this, because I and many other good doers that do this because we want change and have suffered, and we all have suffered. We speak out, we get accused of morons of being military intelligence and disinfo agents. My God, how ignorant is that? This shows a massive ignorance in how intelligence and covert methods work, right? We are doing good. Do not attack us. Stop attacking the cure. Start attacking the cancer. And will it do any good? Well, what harm can it do? It's getting out there. It's getting out there. It's a platform in which victims are publicly speaking out. So my God, what harm can it do? And do you know what? So what if the establishment, as they call it, finds out what we know? Do you know what? They know anyway, because they're behind it and orchestrating it and protecting those that are doing it. So it's no news to them, but it's news to the public. And do you know what I say to people? Right, stop attacking me that go out there and others that go out there and get testimonies and do good, and start speaking to the victims and survivors of this horrific abuse, right, and see how it destroys their lives, right? Like when I was a police officer, I would go home with the burden of the testimonies I heard of the young kids. I was approached 3 weeks ago by a young girl. Back in the day, at the relevant time, she was 14 years old, right? She was a victim of terrible sexual abuse, and I prosecuted and investigated and convicted the case for her and the paedophile that did it, right? This girl contacted me 15 years later. She tried to get hold of me prior to that, but the police wouldn't disclose anything about me, right? Anyway, she found me and she spoke to me. And do you know what? I burst into tears because I remember this brave girl. Her first name is Kirsty, and me and Kirsty are going to do an interview, and we're going to do it very soon. And Kirsty got in touch with me and she said, John, I saw on social media what they'd done to you, meaning what the establishment had crushed me. She said, you were nothing but an inspiration and a help to me. She said, many times I thought of committing suicide because of the abuse I endured, and all I heard was your voice resonating in my head with words of encouragement. I remember the support you gave me and my sister and my family, the compassion and the love you showed us. She said, John, I thought of you near enough most days, and more so in my dark days. And I said, Kirsty, I thought of you exactly the same amount of time. There wasn't a day went by when I didn't think of you and wished you well, darling, because she was part of my life like I was part of her life. And I did this because I care for humanity, and I believe in Jesus, and I hate the devil, and I don't like those who hurt children, right? So those that attack us for doing good, you know, shame on you. This will do nothing but good. Okay, the government might control it. Do you know what? So damn what? This is changing now. The balance is going in our favour. They've had their day. Now we are having our day. Enough now. Get behind us or get away from us. You're with us or you're against us. And anyone, and I mean this sincerely, and I mean this from my heart and experiential memory of what I've been through and what victims have been through, anyone who attacks us that are doing good, you're part of the problem, and you're with them and you're not with us.
Okay,
you know?
Okay, John, so what brings you here and why are we here?
Do you know what? Two very similar questions with two totally different answers. And what brings me here in a metaphorical state is that I joined the police because I had a general belief that I could make a difference. And when I started actual police work, I realised I couldn't make a difference. But when I started looking at child abuse, I knew I was making a difference. And I did make a difference. I'll never reinvent the wheel. This has been going on for generation after generation, but now's the time for it to stop.
And what would you say about this area in the background? You were saying some interesting stuff.
Well, that brings us on to the second part of the question, that why are we here? Now, we are on the cusp of the City of London with a border with East London, and we're in a very historical part with a lot of significance. Because just to my right is an area called Wapping. We're actually on the banks of the River Thames, and Wapping was the place of the first police station and the birthplace of policing. Now, London and the British Empire was based on colonisation and importation. Now, what was happening was that this is what's called a pool of London. So boats were coming from all over the globe produce was coming from every corner of the globe, the British Empire, into this area. Now what happened was that the sailors were mooring up their boats, well the captains were mooring up their boats along here, and the sailors couldn't even venture onto this part of land where we are now because it was too dangerous. They would be killed, right? So they realised that this was a problem. So if the sailors went out for rest and respite, which would mean drinking and women and everything else, on their way back to the boats they were getting their throats slit, they were getting killed, and they were losing a lot of staff. And what was happening was that the shipping companies needed to relocate because London was too violent, and we're talking about the 1700s, right? So they were going to go to Amsterdam. Now in order to change that they needed what was called policing, so they employed Royal Marines as the first police force, and they become the Marine Police of London. Now because they were Royal Marines, they come under Admiralty law, the law of the high seas. So just down 100 metres to my right was the first court in the UK, and that was called Thames Magistrates Court, and it was actually based on maritime law. So we even see it today. We see it the fact that when someone is in trouble, they stand in the dock. And if a boat is sinking, like someone, if their case is failing, right, they need help, and therefore they need to be bailed out. That's where bail comes from. And the police would, they call it walking the beat, and that was because the police would row a boat and they would beat a drum, and it would be the beat for rowing. So it all comes down to the laws of the high seas. Right, so that's where it all emanates from. Now commercial law still works on that, and it does. So when we look at policing, we look at the thing of policing is a dispute between the trader and the customer, and that's all it's ever been. Policing was never set up for benevolence, and it wasn't. It was set up to protect the trader and to protect the customer and to settle any dispute. So when we think that they're here for child protection and matters, all that, they're not at all. Now the one thing I've learned from the investigation I did, that the biggest commodity are the children, and they are. The children are behind everything. There are organised criminals involved. There are corrupt police officers involved. There are corrupt people within the judiciary involved in order for this machine to operate, and the machinations to allow children to be traded. Children are the absolute commodity and always have been, and we are only just seeing that now, the importance of children. And like I said earlier, someone said to me, drugs are a big commodity, but you can only use drugs once. Children you can use for many times. And the other thing is that bribery value. There is a huge bribery value around all this. Now children and the abuse of children have always and will always govern global politics. They do not need politicians that are stern and upright members of community, because they cannot and will not be bribed. Bent, corrupt and perverted individuals are susceptible to bribery. Now bribery, it moulds with society. Now years ago it was illegal to be a homosexual in the UK, right? Before that, to commit adultery was seen as a massive taboo subject. The times have changed. So if a man has an affair, years ago it could be used as coercive control to get them to vote or to bring in laws the way they wanted. If they were a politician, they could have done that when people were under religious constriction. Now no one's bothered about that. Then it went on to homosexuality. If an MP or a peer were gay, they could be used and manipulated out of fear of exposure to bring in laws or act in a certain way that their taskmasters wanted. That's no longer a problem. However, the last bastion of their control is child sexual abuse. Now there is not one culture on this planet that allows child abuse. They've even found on anthropological levels, right, that child abuse is demonised and ostracised. Even in as far reaches as the jungle tribes of Papua New Guinea, if someone is seen to abuse what they deem as a child, now age of consent varies. That's a cultural matter, right? Now, if anyone abuses a child, they are banished to the jungle on their own for 2 years, knowing there's a good chance they'll die. So they're basically giving them a death sentence, a life sentence. So nowhere, even in areas that are outside of jurisdictional control or legal boundaries, is it deemed acceptable. So it is still used now for parliamentary privilege, gain and coercion. So for MPs that are perverted and like having sex with children, they are promoted to the highest levels of office because they can be controlled. Now, I wish to evidence that, right? Now, I know in my term as a police officer, when I looked into child sexual abuse and I started working with specialised units that only dealt with that, one name used to crop up all the time, and that name was Leon Britton, an MP called Leon Britton, who's now dead, who was Home Secretary, and he was a secretary out of Northern Ireland. Now that man should never been allowed under the vetting procedure to gain that level of high office, yet he was, knowing that he had a dubious personal life and a penchant for having sex with young boys. Why was that allowed? It was allowed for one reason, because he could be bribed. We saw Ted Heath, who started off as a backbench MP, progressed then into the Privy Council and to a front bencher, who again was actively going out and procuring young boys for anal sex. And I spoke to many victims of him. He ended up attaining the highest office in the land, and not only that, changing the political landscape of Britain and Europe by taking us into Europe. Right, the EEC, which went on to become the Economic Union, and now it's what we're trying to get out of. And many people are saying he was coerced into that because he was bullied and he was bribed because he was having sex with young boys. And I spoke to them victims, and it goes further than that, and there's others that say that he was involved in Satanism and the murder of young children.
Okay, so in US, since the Pizzagate and Trump administration, there's been a resistant group operating that's called QAnon. QAnon, they're speculating that it was initiated by the Trump administration, and then followed the Epstein case, etc., and everything else. So the Clinton administration, Podesta, the leaked emails. They're saying, So basically, in England now, it's following. And is there a QAnon type of organization like supporting any of this, or you guys are just self-initiated?
Right, I never got involved too much with global politics. However, I have followed it. I liked. No, I'm going to explain this, and I'm going to come on to Trump and QAnon, and because. No, and I want to talk about this. One of the guys that really struck a chord with me, and many people aren't on board with this guy, was a man called Rodrigo Duterte, and he is a president of the Philippines. Now, anyone who knows anyone who's Filipino, they're such lovely people. They're a nation of smilers, right? All they do is smile, and they keep our National Health Service afloat. The Philippines' biggest export are people, because they're employable and they're kind, right? Now, Rodrigo Duterte started out a campaign of shooting and exterminating drug dealers, because the Philippines become a transient point in which cocaine was going through the country, causing drug wars like we're seeing in Mexico and Central and South America, to feed this global habit of cocaine and drugs and everything else. Now, drastic situations cause drastic measures, and this is relevant because he started getting criticised, and one of his biggest critics was the Pope. I think it might have been Ratzinger. I don't think it was Pope Francis, but I think it was Ratzinger. Accused him of being a murderer. Rodrigo Duterte made a public announcement and he pointed the finger. Bear in mind, this is a Catholic nation, right? The Philippines, they're Catholic. There's a few Muslims. On the whole, they're Catholic, right? Because they're an ex-Spanish colony. And he pointed the finger at Ratzinger and said, "You are the son of a whore. You caused me a murderer and a bad man. We were kind, good people. You brought over your people, your soldiers, your sailors. You turned our women into prostitutes." Right? No, he's talking about the Americans. Sorry, he said the Americans came and they turned. He said, "But you brought your priests over here, and your priests raped our children, of which I was one." Now, this man is a victim of childhood sexual abuse by a priest. He's now announcing it, and he's a leader, brave man. And he's decrying the Pope because he said, "Your priest came here and raped our boys. Never criticised me." What a brave and honest statement. Think of him, what he wants about his policy of executing people, human rights, whatever. But people are dying in their droves, and he used drastic situations to cause a drastic problem. Let's move on to Trump. Right now, I get people say to me about Trump and all that, and I get a bit angry, and I was getting a bit angry about human trafficking because there is this demonisation, right, of mainly East Europeans and the Balkan Europeans, that they are pimps and procurer of child prostitutes. And we see it in the films like Taken and other things, right, where it's always like a Serbian or an Albanian pimp bringing children. Bullshit. Trafficking involves the transient movement of a person from point A to point B for the purpose of crime. I knew that these children were being moved from children's homes to brothels for the purpose of prostitution, and no one cared, and this was happening under our noses. So I didn't much entertain what was going on transatlantically until Trump started his movement, and as a result deliberately exposed the Clintons for what they were doing and openly spoke out about what he's doing. And he made this phenomenal speech in which he said, "I could have retired. I made enough money. I don't need this trouble, this grief. I will take the slings and arrows to protect you from having them. But I know what the Clintons were doing." And part of that, AKA pimping out kids. Out of that was born the QAnon. Now, I've been contacted by an American organisation, right, who haven't given their names, who haven't told me much more, but said, "We follow you, John, and we back you in what you're doing." Now, I need ask no more questions. I love what they're doing, and I love what Trump's doing in exposing Epstein, who Epstein was a procurer and a phenomenal pimp of young children. And as a result, he has exposed our royal family's complicit nature in child abuse, aka Andrew. Now, this isn't the first time Andrew's come under scrutiny. It happened with Ku Stark back in the 80s, and it's happening now. Do you know what? And shame on the British media for whitewashing and covering this up with the Brexit. This is the biggest story we have ever had. And if we know that our royal family have been covering up paedophilia, right, and our media is doing it, our security services are doing it, my God, we need to take to the streets tomorrow, because this is the biggest attack on humanity. We attack our children, we attack the spirituality of our society, and we condemn the next generation to hell. This needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. We need to forget the Brexit stuff. Okay, whatever happens, happens, and concentrate on what is happening with Prince Andrew Epstein and this global trafficking of young and vulnerable children. And do you know what? God bless Trump if he's bringing this out. And again, I'm not a political animal. I'm not taking no sides. But if this man is exposing the shagging of young children by the elite, I'm with him all the way. And I am. So, and that's it. But we look out, one parting shot. We are here at the seat of global democracy. To my left, policing was started to my right, and as I was shown, policing was started, right, to protect the shipping companies set up by the East India Dock Companies, founded by the City of London. This is all about corporate protection. This is not about the protection of our weak and our vulnerable and our children. This is about the protection of trade, right? To my left is the City of London, right, an autonomous state, right, which is not under the jurisdiction of any government, principality, everything. They're on their own, and that is why I've chosen this venue for this chat. Tower Bridge is London Bridge. It isn't. About a quarter of a mile down the Thames, or upriver as they call it, is London Bridge, and that is where the traitors. It's where Traitors Gate is, and that is where the heads of anyone that was opposed to the British Constitution, they had their heads sliced off. They had their heads. We're just saying goodbye to some lovely girls there. Their heads were cut off, and they were stuck on spikes on the old London Bridge, which is like the old iconic sort of medieval bridge. And the heads were stuck on spikes, and that is why that thing there is a spike. And it's really weird on a sort of an energetic level. When you cross over to that part of London, it's got the highest crime rate of London and probably parts of the UK. Got a very, very low vibe to it, and it's there for a reason. It's historically is an area of low vibration, and again, that is a spike, and that really, in my opinion, is a symbol of anyone who goes against the establishment is going to have their head shoved on it, cut off and shoved on it. So that's why it dominates the skyline of London. But to be honest, I care not for it, and I will speak out to anyone who wants to stand up against injustice. That is no threat to us. Is that all they can offer? Then they've got nothing to offer, and we'll keep fighting. And God bless all victims and survivors. Let's stand up, and like I say, the fear. People say to me, John, are you not frightened? And I want to talk about fear, and I say this on many, many occasions. I took an oath in my policing career that I would act without fear or without favour, right? Now, there is no favour I've got on anyone who abuses a child, and my fear against anyone who abuses a child and comes after me, there is no fear, because my fear is a drop in the ocean, a drop in that River Thames, compared to the fear of a young child who's about to be abused. And I say to anyone who's in any dilemma, should they stand up? Yes, you should stand up. Stand up, because our silence is their strength, their weapon, right? And when we speak out, we put the cat amongst the pigeon. We are not frightened of these people. We have the truth. We stand by the truth, and we stick with the truth, and we will expose this evil, vile rot that is undermining, eroding and decimating our society and attacking that is most precious, and our children. So we must stand up and say no more and be frightened of none of them. God bless.